The Paul McCartney death conspiracy starts in 1966 with a car crash in which it's believed Paul McCartney was killed, and then the Beatles, upon hearing the tragedy, replaced him with a celebrity look-alike in order to prevent fans from being angered by the band trying to replace Paul McCartney's role. It is believed that the Beatles, filled with grief over Paul McCartney's death, decided to hide clues about what actually happened in their cover and music. In the Abbey Road cover, Paul McCartney, second from the left, is wearing no shoes, walking out of step with the rest of the Beatles, and holding a cigarette in his right hand. It is believed that this represents a funeral procession, with the man in the white representing heaven, the man in the black representing death, and the man in the blue representing the gravedigger. Paul McCartney, walking out of step with everyone else, is supposed to represent how he is dead and the rest are alive. Paul McCartney holding a cigarette in his right hand is supposed to represent the imposter because before the crash, Paul McCartney was a lefty prominently. On top of this, in the back on the Volkswagen, the license plate is 28 if. This is supposed to be a message about how if Paul McCartney was still alive, he would have been 28 at this time. In the song Glass Onion, John sings, "Here's another clue for you all, the walrus was Paul." This is a connection to the song I Am the Walrus that ends with a live BBC broadcast of a fatal scene from Shakespeare's King Lear with a character groaning, "Oh, untimely death." It is believed that John saying that Paul is the walrus, it is conveying the message that Paul has died because of the death scene at the end of the song I Am the Walrus. Another reason that Paul McCartney is believed to be dead is because on side 2 of the White Album, right after the song I Am So Tired, if you were to spin it backwards, it is believed to be saying, "Paul is dead, man, miss him, miss him, miss him." In the song A Day in the Life, it has the lyrics, "He blew his mind out in a car," which is believed to be a connection to the car crash in which the Beatles are signifying that Paul McCartney died here. In the song Strawberry Fields Forever, it is believed at the very end of the song, Lennon is heard mumbling, "I buried Paul." To add on to all of this, in the song Revolution 9 from the White Album, when it is played backwards, you can also hear "Turn Me On Dead Man," which is again believed to be the Beatles conveying that Paul McCartney was killed in the car crash in 1966. With the car crash in 1966 and the numerous messages that have themes of death, it is very easy to conclude that Paul McCartney was dead and that the Beatles replaced him in order to not anger fans. However, there is one final piece of evidence that debunks the entire Paul McCartney death conspiracy theory. In 2004, Paul McCartney himself admitted that the Paul is Dead clues found in several Beatles albums, covers, and songs were deliberately planted by the group as a part of an elaborate scheme dating back to the summer of 1966. The Paul is Dead clues were an elaborate way in order to make sure that in the event that the Beatles songs that were coming out recently, if they had failed in selling, that they would have a way to make money afterwards because they'd leak about the clues in the albums, thus making people want to investigate for themselves, buying more albums. When it came to deciding who was going to have to die for these clues, Ringo and George declined, and it came down to John and Paul. However, they couldn't decide on John because John was a known prankster, and people would just believe that this was a joke by John. However, Paul was the second most popular Beatle at the time, and it would be convincing enough that people would go out and buy the albums just to find these clues. This piece of evidence shows that in the end, none of the Beatles had died after all, and this was just an elaborate way of making more money off of the albums that they had produced during the time.